July 13, 2008, a quiet suburban street in Orlando, Florida, was shattered by the discovery of a small, blood-stained pillowcase that would soon become the centerpiece of one of the nation's most sensational courtroom dramas. Inside lay the skeletal remains of a 6-year-old girl, Caylee Anthony, and the world would soon turn its gaze to her mother, Casey Anthony, a mother whose name would become synonymous with controversy, media frenzy, and a verdict that left the country divided. Casey Marie Anthony, a 31-year-old former cheerleader and aspiring model, had moved to Orlando with her boyfriend, the charismatic firefighter and paramedic, Charles Chad Anthony. The couple welcomed their daughter, Caylee, in August 2005, and by all outward appearances, the family seemed typical: birthday parties, school runs, and a home filled with the laughter of a young child. Yet beneath the surface, a pattern of instability emerged. The Anthonys moved frequently, often staying with friends or relatives, and Casey's social media accounts were filled with carefully curated images that painted a picture of happiness while concealing growing tensions. The first crack in the facade appeared in June 2008, when Caylee was reported missing by her grandmother, Cindy Anthony. Cindy claimed she had not seen her granddaughter since May 15, and after repeated phone calls went unanswered, she called 911. The police arrived to find a pristine house, a mother who claimed she was at a yoga class, and a boyfriend who was at work, and a child who was nowhere to be found. The case took a darker turn on July 11, when Casey's father, George Anthony, was found dead from an apparent suicide, his body discovered in the family's driveway. Investigators soon uncovered a set of troubling facts. Casey had been seen driving a rental car near the location where Caylee's remains would later be found, and a mysterious lullaby CD was discovered among her belongings, a CD that would later become a key piece of evidence. On July 13, the Orlando Police Department announced the grim discovery of Caylee's remains in a wooded area near her home, wrapped in a pillowcase and buried in a shallow grave. A forensic pathologist testified that the child had died of blunt force trauma to the head and asphyxiation, and that the injuries were consistent with a violent act. The evidence, while damning, was largely circumstantial. No weapon was recovered, no DNA of an assailant was found, and the precise timeline of Caylee's death remained elusive. The trial began on May 24, 2011, before a jury of 12 strangers who would be tasked with weighing a mountain of media-saturated narratives against the cold, clinical facts presented in the courtroom. The prosecution, led by the formidable prosecutor Linda Dunn, framed Casey as a cold, calculating murderer who had meticulously staged Caylee's disappearance to hide her own infidelity and financial desperation. They presented a timeline that placed Casey at the scene, highlighted her chick-lit blog entries that seemed to glorify a carefree lifestyle, and played a now infamous voicemail she left to her mother. "I'm sorry I have to tell you, but I'm not going to be able to get the kids home. My daughter has been taken to the hospital." The prosecution also introduced the lullaby CD, a 1999 recording that contained a hidden message: "If you love me," and "I will be home in 24 hours. Prosecutors argued that the message was a confession, a secret code between Casey and the murderer. The defense, under the direction of attorney Jose Baez, painted a starkly different picture. Baez argued that the evidence was riddled with inconsistencies, that the forensic pathologist's conclusions were speculative, and that the timeline presented by the prosecution was a house of cards built on speculation. He suggested that Caylee's death could have been an accident, a tragic, unintentional result of a troubling incident that Casey panicked over and attempted to cover up. Baez also introduced a series of alibi witnesses, including a teenage friend who claimed Casey was at a party on the night of Caylee's death, and a digital timeline that suggested Casey's phone records did not place her near the burial site. The defense's strategy was to inject reasonable doubt into the minds of the jurors, emphasizing that without a body, a weapon, or a clear motive, The state could not meet the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Day after day, the courtroom became a theater. The nation watched as Casey, with her striking blonde hair and composed demeanor, sat silently, her eyes often glistening with tears that seemed to echo the public's own conflicted emotions. The media circus outside the courthouse turned the trial into a cultural phenomenon, spawning endless memes, talk show debates, and even a Casey Anthony subreddit that dissected every minute detail of the case. The public's appetite for sensationalism was palpable, and the trial's daily coverage was punctuated with headlines like "Murder or Miscarriage" and "The Mother Who Won't Be Convicted." After 6 weeks of testimony, closing arguments, and emotional testimonies from both sides, the jury began deliberations on July 5, 2011. For 10 hours, they grappled with the evidence, the narratives, and the weight of deciding a woman's fate. In a moment that sent shockwaves through the country, the foreperson stood and announced a verdict of "not guilty" on the counts of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter. Subscribe to the verdict for more stories like this.